Welcome back to the French Rugby Podcast with me, Tim Groves, ex-Scotland international and adopted Frenchman, Johnnie Beattie, and former World Cup winner, top 14 winner, Champions Cup winner, won it all, Jerome Kaino. We will bring in our special guest shortly as well to have a look ahead to the Wallabies and their meeting with France this weekend. How are you guys, first of all? Because Jerome, you were down in Johnny's neck of the woods at the weekend, weren't you?
I was in Bayonne. How'd
it go?
We lost. We lost the game. Had a lot of my young guns from the Esquires playing in the game, which was quite special. But man, what a place to play at! The atmosphere, the singing, the crowd.
How good!
It's definitely a unique place to go and play. And despite the result, it was a great experience, great occasion.
Mate, you'd have played in pretty much every awesome stadium in the world. For me, Stade Jean Daugé is right up there in terms of atmosphere, public behind you, engagement with the crowd. Like, it's rocking. Like, where would you rank it in terms of the places you've been to and played and coached at?
I was speaking to one of my coaches before that game, and we were also talking specifically about the Bayonne Stadium. It definitely sits up there with. It's not as loud as test match arenas, but just the constant singing and the party atmosphere that it has for such a tiny city, small club. It's incredible, and it just goes for the whole duration of the game. Like, you hear in the warm-up the song Fête de Morlion, and everyone's singing it before the game. The whole stadium goes dark and everyone's got their lights flashing. It's definitely sits up there with one of the most unique, special places that I've played at or been a part of.
And coming on to your weekend, Johnny, a bit of a contrast to Murrayfield, which wasn't so rocking.
So weirdly, we were talking about this in the stands, so during commentary, and like Murrayfield, if you go and play against Edinburgh, it had a horrible nickname as the Library, in that it's quite a quiet place to play, like super respectful. But even when Scotland came up with massive actions, don't get me wrong, the anthems and things are amazing. But then, because Australia dominated quite a lot of the possession early on, it was quite quiet. It was quite eerie. And we were comparing it to the Frenchness of the whole way through, whether it's a brass band, whether it's choirs, whether it's whatever it is. French rugby's kind of carnival-like. It's much more noisy. But mate, outside of the game, which we'll probably talk about as well, even though it's not a Scottish Rugby podcast, loved Edinburgh. It was great. Did corporate before the game, after the game with Henry Spate, who I think we all found out was the most handsome man in Edinburgh this weekend. Joe Tomane as well.
His hair was getting a lot of love, Henry. His hair.
Mate, he's just a handsome man, isn't he? He's a handsome man. So he kept getting stopped. The afro was getting played with. The rest of us were redundant, but we had a good time. It was good to catch up as well. Because of COVID, you haven't had these catch-ups with old player mates or people you played with, or it's like Johnny Barclay, Kelly Brown, Jim Hamilton. It was just good to see everyone, and did the commentary during the game. And then Tim, you and I caught up after the game.
One beer
started out as one beer turned into a few more, and a late night. But mate, you can't beat international weekends. Like, the stadium, the buzz, the quality of the rugby was awesome, and catching up with old mates, you know what it's like. It's always a good time. It was difficult to back that up. I had to go to Paris on Sunday and commentate on the Bordeaux-Toulon game after not too much sleep, which was tough.
I think your idea of backing up nowadays, Johnny, is a bit different to Jerome's. Yours is sort of back-to-back late nights and kebabs. Jerome's is a bit more professional.
I couldn't handle those back-to-back big nights anymore.
Well, I mean, I think you'd have fitted in with us on Saturday night, Jerome, because I don't know about you, Johnny, I don't want to bring you down, but it did feel like we were old men in the corner. There was some scary outfits.
100 years old. 100 years old, and we are such boring old, but it's horrible. And that's it. The Halloween costumes, the flesh that's out. And now I'm thinking about my kids, my daughter, she's going to be there in 10. I'm like, it's scary. I'm like, get me home. I need to get back to my bed. It's changed, mate. It's awesome. But don't get me wrong, nightclubs and stuff now, mate, it's an alien environment for me. I'm happy with some good food, a few beers, catching up with mates, but mate, I need to get me home before midnight. That's my game, I'd say.
Let's talk a bit about the rugby then. Again, we're coming out a bit later in the week, so we'll throw it ahead mainly to Australia facing France. But Johnny, you touched on it. What will France have learnt from that?
I think pre-game, I think there's quite a few things that have been leveled at Australia, like a little bit inconsistent, a little bit indisciplined. And don't get me wrong, I don't think either side were utterly dominant at the weekend. Neither team were fantastic, but they just did enough to win against a Scottish side that couldn't put them away. So I think they'll know. And this, again, it's an Australian side without Big Will Skelton, without the Arnold boys, without Kirtley Beale. But they'll know that they're competitive. They go hard at the breakdown. They compete well at maul time. They slop your ball. They make it difficult. And they're not going to be blown over in Paris. So they know they're getting a real test match coming. And also they've had a week prep. They've had a run out together. So they've had one prep week ahead of the French side, which will make it more difficult. So I think previously, I don't want to use the term like a walkover, considering they beat South Africa, beat Argentina, and came within the last kick of beating New Zealand. But I think they would have been seen as a softer touch maybe 3-4 months ago. Now, first win away from home on a 5-game tour, they'll be up for it and they'll come to Paris and chuck everything at it.
Man, I think the Wallabies showed a lot. Definitely in the last few months, they've shown a lot of self-belief within the group and character. Definitely in the weekend, every time Scotland scored, they seemed to find some way to hit back and score again. If like you play up here in the north, and any team that gets a 7 or 6 point lead at home, it's pretty tough to crawl back. And the Wallabies showed that. They showed a lot of self-belief, a lot of character to be able to find something to always answer back every time Scotland scored. So for me, that they did it against the All Blacks, where they're behind by miles, and were able. I thought they were pretty unlucky to lose that game as well. Yep. And like Johnny said, beat the Springboks and Argentina. So not flash wins, not flash games, but they've shown what's really important when you want to win close test matches, and that's character and self-belief.
We'll chat a little bit more about France-Australia when we get our guest on in a minute. But while we're on last weekend, Jerome, what do you make of the All Blacks at the moment? Because there's a lot of chat about them. They obviously beat Japan, but weren't convincing. There was a red card in that game. How do you think they'll get on against Wales, Scotland and England?
Man, it's going to be tough. Obviously losing their skipper and a couple of notable leaders, Dan Coles, and also with Brodie being with the suspension. So if there's anything they want to learn about playing up here, it's right now. If they want to learn something for the World Cup, it's the next few weeks. So it's not going to be easy, but yeah, I think their depth will definitely be tested. But I'll back them to win all 3 test matches. Sorry about that, lads. But
the confidence is still there. The Kiwi confidence is still there.
I know that the best place to be in is to be labelled as the underdog, and for them going into the next 3 test matches, there's no pressure on them. I think everyone's just going to expect the same performances that they've seen pretty much for the most of the year. And if the All Blacks go undefeated in these next 3 test matches, I would say it's a pretty decent season for them heading into World Cup year.
Right, we will chat a little bit about the top 14 later on, Johnny, and we'll bring our guest on in just a minute. But we should get straight to your meter moment of the week. What was the best moment in French rugby this weekend?
It came from the top 14. It wasn't quite Toulouse's performance in Bayonne. Sorry, Jerome. But it was another team going away from home. And Jerome, you know how hard it is to go away to this place and win. And Po did just that at the weekend. 4 tries. They competed absolutely everywhere, like ridiculous to watch. They're bottom of the table prior to the game, which nobody, I don't think, over here saw them winning, but they were class. Line out time, scrum, defensively, they scrapped for every bit. And they ran in 4 awesome tries at La Rochelle, and probably the biggest upset of the year so far. La Rochelle struggling with their 10s out injured, and Po absolutely capitalized. So this week's moment of this meter moment of the week is Po spanking European champions La Rochelle in La Rochelle, which was absolutely insane.
Like Johnny said, it's a tough place to play. And I didn't really watch the game. We were preparing for our Bayonne game, and then heading to the bus, I walked past the screen in the lobby and saw the scores. I was pretty surprised, but yeah, definitely a tough place to go and get a result like that. So definitely deserved the game of the week.
There we go. All in agreement. That was Johnnie and Jerome's Meter Moment of the Week. And Meter is the world's #1 wireless meat thermometer, recently making over 20 million cooks better with their game-changing app and completely wireless Bluetooth meat probe. You can use it on a barbecue, in the oven, or in a pan. And you can get your hands on one at meter.com. Plus, you can now get 20% off any full price item. All you have to do is enter the code FrenchPod20 at checkout. That's FrenchPod20, and you'll get 20% off any full price item at meter.com. Let's get our guest on now then, and we can have a chat with a man who won 17 caps for Australia, played for them at the 2015 World Cup, but is now applying his trade in the south of France with Biarritz. And most importantly, was keeping Johnnie company in the corporate suites of Murrayfield at the weekend. Joe Tomane joins us. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming on. And we mentioned it there. Any gloating on Saturday? How was it with Johnnie?
Look, to be honest with you, I didn't want to piss the guy off. He was kind enough to invite me. And it was an awesome experience. I've never really done anything like that before. So, and I wanted to make sure that I get invited in the future as well. So.
Mate, 100%. They do all these the what do you call, like the report cards. They're like, how good were the guests? And everyone's absolutely hammered when they fill these things out at the end. But Joe Tomane 10, Henry Spate 10, Johnnie Beattie, like my mates were like 3.5, 2.5. But you absolutely killed it. And then it was awesome. It would have been good to go for a beer, but you were exhausted from travel. But Tim and I made the stupid idea to go out for a beer with handsome Henry Spate, and we basically just chatted to ourselves while everyone in Edinburgh amazed at Henry. But mate, it was a great weekend. It was great to have you over as well, and obviously a big Wallabies win. So, mate, glad you enjoyed it. Be awesome to have you back the next couple of years.
In terms of the rugby, Joe, obviously it was a big win for Australia because they'd lost the last few against Scotland, and they've lost a few this year as well. So their form wasn't great. So how big a win was that for them?
I think it was huge, especially for this young squad. A lot of these guys, haven't really had this sort of experience as well. So it's good for also Dave Rennie because he's obviously been under pressure. And from what I heard, and I touched on this a little on Saturdays, like all the boys rave about how good of a culture and environment he's created within that squad. So it was sort of vindicating for him as well to get this win. And, the fruits of his hard work is starting to show now because it wasn't the prettiest win for the Wallabies. Scotland were probably the better side for most of that match, but I guess that resilience that he's been trying to install in a lot of these in this young squad showed through, and they were able to grind out a win against a very good Scotland side.
And Jerome, as a breakdown coach, Johnnie loves a noisy stat. Here's one for you, Johnnie. A third of Scotland's rucks were under 3 seconds. So generally, the Wallabies managed to slow Scotland down. And Michael Hooper would have been a big factor in that, a guy you know very well, Jerome.
Yeah, I definitely Hoops would have been a big part of that result. But in the last few games that I've watched the Wallabies play, they definitely focus a huge amount on their winning the contact. There's some big contacts every time the Wallabies play. So in terms of playing the French, I think that'll be key for them to getting on top of the French side, especially with the best player in the world playing at scrum half for the French, slowing down their breakdown, making it annoying for them. I think that'll be key.
I mean, it wasn't just Hooper as well. Like, it was awesome to see him back. Like, it was, with everything he's been through over the past year, World Rugby, mate, it's awesome to have him back on the field. But like Slipper, the tight five up front as well, the work they got through at Maul, slowing down collisions like you mentioned, stopping Maul attack and stopping launches. Mate, they were really impressive. That was the collision bit. It'll go up a level against France this week because France are more physical than Scotland. They've probably got one of the best packs on the planet. But like the other guy you mentioned there, and I thought from an Australian perspective, I thought Tate McDermott was like a bit of an unknown for me as well. So to see him get around the danger he poses as well to a French defensive line, I'm sure Sean Edwards will be all over Nick White, Tate McDermott this week in their trainings. But yeah, man, just physically, the way they played and the way they bossed that gain line, they really restricted Scotland. And then even if they were broken, there were quite a few line breaks and entries into red zone, but the way they scrapped and made big turnovers in their red zone was really impressive as well. So, mate, there'll be a big test this weekend. It'll go up a level. Like I mentioned before, they've got a game under their belt. They'll be ready. But it'll be a huge game for France this weekend.
Johnnie mentioned the break he's had there, Joe. Michael Hooper, how important is he to this Australia side?
What he offers, not only physically with with his breakdown prowess and his leadership, but just from a spiritual aspect as well. Like he's a huge spiritual leader of that squad. And a lot of these young guys that are coming through actually, grew up watching him play. So he's obviously a huge inspiration to those guys as well. So yeah, he's hugely important, and I think he's always been a huge factor in Wallaby wins as well in the past. Every game that the Wallabies have won, he's always had a huge influence. And for them to get a win over France, he'd have to be really influential.
You played against him tons, Jerome. I'm sure he was an absolute nuisance to play against, but where does he rank in terms of the back rows you faced in your career?
Oh, without a doubt, one of the best. Mate, we talk about the break that he had beginning of the season. I'm surprised that it took that long for him to take a little break from the game. I think it was for 10 years non-stop. He played 80 minutes during every Super Rugby game, and then get to the Test series, and he'll play every game 80 minutes as well. And never injured. I'd never see him injured or anything, go off with an injury during games. And did that non-stop. I think he's got the record for the fastest 50 tests and the fastest 100 games in Super Rugby. So for me, I was quite surprised he didn't take a mental break or a little break earlier in his career. But man, hats off to him. He's such a durable, resilient player, and I think he's key for the Wallabies going into this World Cup year.
We mentioned the breakdown there. What are the other key factors this weekend then? France, Australia, where's the game going to be won and lost?
Mate, breakdown's definitely key, but I think up front, the French pack have created this little. They've got this. They've made a name for themselves that they're quite brutal, really efficient with their line out, their scrum. So I think up front, if you can't get a sentency there, then you might struggle.
I definitely agree with Jerome there, purely because France need quick ball to, I guess, get their backs involved, and you see how dangerous they are when they do get that quick ball. So Australia will probably need another stat like they had against Scotland, where you said a third of their breakdown were just, what was it, like under 3 seconds?
Yeah.
They're going to need to have that sort of influence. And I think it more so starts in the contact zone, like in the tackle, because a lot of these big bodies, once they get moving and the defense lines get tighter, that just creates more space out wide. And then you got guys like DuPont in open space. It's not going to be pretty for the Wallabies.
And mate, as somebody, you've done a pile of analysis in your time. When you look from the outside and you watch this French side, do you see any perceived areas of weaknesses? Jerome's just touched on the strengths. But if you were Dave Rennie, where would you be looking to attack?
I think a lot of their strengths depend. You need possession, and you also need quick ball. So I think attacking their forward pack as much as possible, slowing them down, slowing their pace down, especially in attack, is going to be hugely important. And I think it goes a long way. I think, the teams that they probably struggle with in the past are the teams that sort of limit their try scoring abilities. And, playing against some French sides when things are tight and they start to get desperate and they start, throwing all these crazy loopy like offloads and things are just, when things aren't going well for them, that's sort of the things that you have to bring them into. You have to bring them into that sort of dogfight, and the only way you can do that is if you slow their ball down.
I might come back and ask you all for a score prediction at the end, but let's have a little bit of a chat about you, Joe, because we saw last weekend when you were at Murrayfield, we saw Jack Dempsey playing for Scotland against Australia, having won 14 caps for them back in the day a few years ago. And we're seeing a lot of players now take advantage of that World Rugby eligibility rule change. You've obviously got Samoan heritage. You've played for the Wallabies. The likes of Jeff Tumunga-Allen, Stephen Luatua now in that Samoa fold. Have you ever been approached or not?
No, I haven't been approached, and rightly so. I think a lot of the Samoan backs available are really good. Competitions, especially in the positions that I play in, are big. So, they got a lot of talent in the backs department. So, if the phone call does happen, I'll definitely consider it. It's something that I'll probably have to talk to my mum, dad, and my wife about, because ultimately the decisions that I make have a huge impact on them. And
he's being pretty modest. He'll be in my starting Manu Samoa team.
100%. Well, seriously though, that must have been quite a strange moment for Jack Dempsey. Like growing up in Australia, representing your country 14 times. I understand he's got Scottish heritage, but then playing against the country that you represented, listening to that national anthem, and then singing the other, like it must have been a really strange process and a little bit of a head fuck for him for a first cap for a new country. But also, I guess, cool for him in that you've been told by Dave Rennie that he wasn't physical enough and circumstances change and you've got that heritage and the rule changes as work. But I found myself thinking, watching the anthems, geez, I feel a little bit sorry for this guy. This must be a real head fuck of a first cap for a new nation. Like it can't have been an easy start to play against Australia. But mate, it's weird. I didn't think this rule would have a drip down effect on Scotland. I thought it would be more Pacific nations, secondary nations that needed boosted pre-World Cup. And that's it. When we see the boys now that are lining up for Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, it just means that like this test window now is going to be even more interesting. And mate, all hell is going to break loose in the World Cup with the boys that have been picked back in these teams. It's going to be absolutely amazing.
And there's still a year to go, Joe. So there's time yet. We'll do a bit.
Sign them up. Hashtag bring them back.
You made the move to France, obviously, with Montpellier back in 2016. Johnnie knows Montpellier very well, having played for them. But speaking of kind of international rugby, how tough a decision was that to make? Because obviously with the Giteau law, as they call it, in Australia, you would have known that you were kind of ending your international career, at least for a period of time.
Yeah. I think, it was a really hard decision because, growing up in Australia, all I ever wanted to do was play for the Wallabies. And it's kind of like I put my dream aside to chase something else, I guess. And that's really what it came down to, is just, at that moment, where do I see myself and in my career, and what else do I want to chase and achieve? And originally the reason why I went to Europe is because I wanted the positional change, and I wanted to sort of migrate into the centers, and I didn't think I was going to get that opportunity playing in Australia. And so, the opportunity in France came with Jake White to sort of start to learn my trade in centers, because I feel like 32-year-old wingers don't have a shelf life, which is why I wanted the positional change and obviously develop my game and my skill. And thankfully, I got that opportunity.
We talked a little bit at the weekend, but how did you find that change? Because it's not evident for everybody. How did you find arriving in Montpellier, different culture, different language? You mentioned coach there, who was Jake. That quite quickly became Vern Cotter. You probably had time under him as well, and 2 coaches in 2 years. We all know France can be a bit more volatile, but how did you find the change in moving environment initially?
It was really tough. But it was also an awesome experience to sort of, once you start to see past all of the French quirks, because there are a lot of quirks, and then you sort of grow to love it. And I was just grateful that I had my wife move with me, because she made things a lot easier. But yeah, man, like now that I've come back second time round and I've understood what it's like and what it takes to sort of move here, I've grown to just love the place.
Having experienced Montpellier and then moving to Leinster, and now back in France, back at Biarritz, what would be the one thing that sticks out for you from each of the clubs? Is there a similarity from Montpellier to Biarritz, or also Leinster to any of the other two?
The lifestyle, I guess, is quite similar here in Biarritz to Montpellier, and I'd say the way they approach the rugby is completely different. You know, you got Leinster, who are quite, I'd say, structured in a sense, ultimate professional side, and that's shown to be a successful recipe because of, you know, how many champion finals they've been in, how many European Cups they've won, and then coming to France, it sort of, I guess, opened me up outside of rugby and made me appreciate rugby a little more because, you know, the lifestyle makes you, I know, live a little bit and appreciate the things that you actually get. I don't think I appreciated rugby as much when I was in Australia because it just sort of seemed like it was a bit of a job almost, and it is, but it's also a privilege. And I think playing in France makes you realize how privileged you are.
Mate, to touch on that time at Leinster, Stu Lancaster was your coach there. He's obviously coming to France now to coach Racing next season. How good a coach was he, and what can Racing fans expect next year?
Oh man, he was honestly an amazing coach. Probably one of the best coaches that I had. And his attention to detail, even to like small things, is what I reckon separates him from like a lot of coaches. I was on a podcast last night and I was telling them about one of my first training sessions, and we had a little like 10-meter passing drill, and they had camcorders out recording us just throw these little short passes. And I was like, oh, well, surely everyone knows how to throw a pass. You know, you wouldn't be a professional athlete if you didn't know how to throw a pass. And then the next day we reviewed that little passing segment and we reviewed every single little bit of detail, like where your hand was on the ball, are you catching it early, the last finger that should be touching the ball when you release is such and such, you know, like just broke down like the skill of passing to its absolute, you know, detail. And I think that had a huge success on like a lot of the young guys coming through because it sort of showed them the kind of application that you need to be at your best. And I think that's what he'll probably bring to Racing. And I also don't think he'll try and change too much of the flair that is in French rugby, because there is a lot of flair. I think he'll try and bring pieces to manage it and sort of teach him, okay, there's a time and place, how you should, you know, like try and teach guys, you know, this is when these sort of situations we need to be able to do this, and then obviously give him the opportunity to express himself as well.
There's not too much flair involved with just getting the ball and passing it to Tuisova.
That's true.
Easy. But you also mentioned at the weekend that he was awesome in a sense. Like all coaches we work with are very different. You get guys that are very controlling, guys that are very open. And you mentioned that he was an extreme delegator. So he basically just empowered all the players. It was mini groups, and you essentially go the skill set bits aside, but team templates and how we play, go and create it yourselves, do it yourselves, which I thought was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he was really big on the players driving the culture. You know, having a place where it's a player-led team. And to me, it makes sense because he's not going to be on the field doing it for you, you know, like sometimes you could prepare for matches and some things aren't going, like the things they might have prepared for aren't going to be what the picture that you get on the weekend. So being able to problem solve as a playing group is hugely important. And that's sort of, I think that's where his philosophy was sort of based around. And he just made sure that he gave you all the tools to prepare you for any sort of situation on the weekend, and I think that's why he's been so successful.
Is that something you're keen on, Jerome, as a coach? Because we hear a lot about certain coaches that might be a bit more autocratic and sort of do this, do that. But it seems like the more time goes on and the more modern we get in coaching, things being player-led is more and more important.
Yeah, I'm huge on that. I come from like where I was in New Zealand. Majority of our culture, our team environments were heading into being player-led. There's a lot of autonomy being pushed. So even with the All Blacks, Richie, Dan, and a lot of the leaders ran majority of our week. So for me, it was kind of a natural thing to go into and a natural thing to be a part of. And I've seen the positives and the benefits of having a player-led environment, but I've also seen a negative effect that it has, especially if the leaders aren't driving what's best for the team. So I can see both, but if the leaders or whoever the players that are driving it, if they're heading it in the right direction, then it's a great philosophy and great way to have your team.
I'm sure those players know who they are, Jerome, the ones that are not the right leaders. But Johnny, pick your leaders carefully, eh?
Well, I was going to say name and shame. Obviously you can't, but can you give us an example of where the leadership roles ended up in the wrong hands and how the shit hit the fan without naming clubs and people, obviously naming names?
No, it's just in terms of, like Joe said, there's teams need a level of attention to detail, but also like accountability. And if you get leaders who focus a lot more on the social aspects of a team than what's needed on the field to be actually, you turn up and you tell each other what to do, whether it's positive or negative. I've had a team where a lot of the focus was put on enjoying the team environment, whether it's social, without naming too many people. Or,
right, we'll just say it's the Babas. It's the Babas.
Yeah.
And Joe, I don't know how player-led it is at Biarritz, but as someone who would be going in as a leader at the stage of your career that you're at, how did that move to Biarritz come about, and why Biarritz?
Well, Biarritz, basically.
It's an attractive place to be, I'm sure.
It is an amazing place. But I guess when I was in Japan, and the call came through by Matt Clarkin, who's the director of rugby here, what he did to sell me the place was the fact that he said that they had high ambitions of getting back into the top footing. So they just obviously been relegated, and they have a really young squad and high ambitions of being back in the top 14. And I saw that as an opportunity to go be a part of something special from the ground up, That was the most attractive part about coming here. Coming into a squad with a lot of young guys, hopefully passing on good knowledge from my past experiences and building something special with this young group.
That and the beach, though, eh? Like the beach played a part as well.
Well, I can't swim, so.
It's one of your favorite spots as well, Jerome. You absolutely love Biarritz.
Yeah, my family were there on the weekend with me. I stayed behind. What a spot.
The fact that you've both been all over the world now, and there's randomly been the possibility of an ANZAC team made up of a combination of Kiwis, Aussies playing against the Lions in 2025. What do you make of that as a prospect?
That would be incredible. Even when I was playing in New Zealand, we would always talk about the Lions tour, and we used to always have this comment: how come they get to combine a team and we don't have one down here?
Nice.
And we always thought of having Springboks, Aussie, All Blacks version of the Lions. It'd be awesome to have the test every couple of years or 4 years. No, if there's any possibility of that forming, I'll definitely be a supporter.
You're not going to come out of retirement, though, throw your hat and learn to play.
No
Sounded
chance.
like it.
Man, I think it'd be huge for for the game, especially in Australia, it will create like a lot of buzz, because the buzz around rugby right now is sort of dwindling a little bit, especially in Australia, because obviously there are 5 major sports that we're very competitive in, and the talent pool obviously seems to pick a lot of the other sports. So creating something like that where you're getting the best of Australia, the best of New Zealand, playing against the best of Europe, like that'll sell tickets anywhere. They'll sell tickets to Mars. Like that'd be awesome. What I'd like to see is the Pacific Isles team back. That would be unreal. And like I think just because there's a lot of European-based Pacific Islander players now, so they already have that attraction with the fans up on this side of the world. Having a Pacific Isles team that are tour play against like the European sides, I reckon it'll sell tickets everywhere.
That was one of the games that I looked forward to the most. So I played against the Pacific Island team at Murrayfield, and I was so pumped to play in it because I'd grown up watching Sitiveni Sivivatu and all these legends wearing this jersey, and that was a chance to play against them. I agree with you 100% as well. If logistically it's easy and you can pull a team together like a Baba's team, but make it a PI's team for autumn internationals or whatever it is, and there's a drip down effect economically as well to help out Pacific nations, it's a no-brainer. It's amazing. If we can sell out stadiums and do it, it's amazing. But in terms of a player playing against it, there was almost no more frightening team to play against because all the best athletes in the world are in that one team, and then you've got to rock up and play against them. So in terms of excitement factor as a player and as a fan, I don't think there's any other, apart from maybe a hybrid of the South African, New Zealand, Aussie nations, I don't think there's any more exciting prospect of a team.
And Jerome's not coming out of retirement, but we've got an Australia, New Zealand combined team, and we've got a Pacific Island team. And Joe's putting his hand up for both, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about that. Again, I'll probably be 5th in line for both sides.
I'll put my hand up to be Waterboy or something.
Yeah.
Get on the door.
I'll come for the social aspect, I guess. I'll come lead the charge there.
And since we've got you both and we're on this subject, right, we've got Coach Kaino as one selector. Joe, not a coach yet, but a very experienced selector in the other corner. We've got a New Zealand-Australia combined 15 at the moment. How many players from New Zealand? How many players from Australia? Chuck some names around. Go.
Oh, well, Rieko Ioane's got to start at centre for me.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm surprised he hasn't been World Rugby Player of the Year. He's been nominated a couple of times, but hasn't won.
Yeah.
He's got to be starting 13 for me.
I'll go Adi Savea, Michael Hooper.
I'll let you do the forwards and I'll try and figure out the backs.
Give us the other one in that back row, Jerome.
At the moment, I'll go Harry Wilson, Adi Savea, Michael Hooper. Akira Ioane on the bench. Locks, I would go Rory Arnold, Sam Whitelock.
Great.
Slipper. Cody Taylor. And Daniela Tupou.
That's a great forward pack. I mean, I would go Aaron Smith, Richie Mo'unga. You could flip a coin between Tate McDermott and Nick White on the bench. They're both quality halfbacks. Then you'd probably I'd go Hunter Paisami, Rieko Ioane in the centres. Geordie Barrett at fullback. Tom Wright on one wing. And Caleb Clark on the other.
Seems pretty decent, Johnny.
Beasts.
That's a good team.
Yeah.
But this is off the top of our head. We need to
give us time.
Oh, yeah.
I've left Beauden Barrett out of the starting lineup. That's ridiculous. He's won 2 World Rugby Player of the Years, and I've left him out of the starting lineup. He could easily be at 10. Then you got Damien McKenzie, who could be at fullback.
We did put you on the spot. We'll give you a couple of meetings in Biarritz, a couple of coach meetings, selector meetings. You'll be fine.
And also, like, especially with the talent available now, like, you imagine you had that team lining up against the Pacific Island team. Like, never mind the British Lions, but if you could get that composite team to sell tickets in the Southern Hemisphere or anywhere as a spectacle, or take it to America for a spectacle game and sell tickets and spread the word of the game, it'd be insane. So we can do our PI team next week.
I mean, that lineup would be what? Sammy Radradra at 13 versus Rico Ioane. They're probably the two most exciting 13s.
From the glamour of the potential of a team like that, Joe, talk us through last weekend, because we mentioned you were with Johnnie at Murrayfield. But I mean, I dread to think about your journey there, because you were playing away at Rouen on Friday night.
Yeah, so we played Friday night against Rouen away. Unfortunately, lost that game. Then I had to be on I think it was a 10:30 flight to Glasgow. But Rouen's about 2-hour car ride from Paris, Charles de Gaulle. So my morning started pretty early. I left Rouen about 6:30 in the morning. I got to Charles de Gaulle at 9 because there was a little bit of traffic. So I was running through Charles de Gaulle trying to find my gate, and that airport's massive. So I worked up a bit of a sweat sitting on my packed flight. Unfortunately, this girl was just sitting next to me, and I was just sweating bullets from running through this airport. And then got off at Glasgow, and John Beattie, legend, unbelievable man, picks me up from the airport and drives me to Murrayfield. We had to be at Murrayfield at like 1:30 for a bit of like a logistics meeting. And we were almost late for that because obviously my flight. Watched the game and then went home. Was up at like 4:30 the next day to get a flight to Dublin to meet my wife, who was in Dublin for the weekend. And then we flew to Bordeaux and then caught a train to Biarritz.
It's a hell of a weekend. The main reason I asked was to make me feel better, because I had a bit of a drive, but that sounds a lot worse. So I feel better.
For clarification as well, that wasn't me that picked you up at the airport in Glasgow.
Oh, it was your dad?
It was my dad. So
Oh.
my dad picked Joe up.
How was he as a taxi driver, Joe? How was he?
Oh, he was awesome. We had great yarns on the way down. I think we covered almost every single topic we could think of. It was awesome, you know. Like I got to learn so much about him and his story, and obviously vice versa. It was real cool.
Best friends now, mate. They're best friends. They're tight.
Oh yeah. We're going to do a golf and whiskey tour in Scotland soon. So,
oh, yes. I didn't even get the invite. This is amazing.
Well, we won't mention the rugby on Friday night in Rouen. You mentioned it there. 12-9 sounds like an absolute thriller, but that is about the longest. Well, it is the longest journey you can get really from Biarritz, isn't it, in terms of an away trip? I know when Johnnie was playing in Pro D2, he used to say they made him catch the bus everywhere, but obviously. Tell me they didn't make you catch the bus to Rouen.
No, we actually flew in that morning. So, yeah, the Biarritz were real fun.
Glamour.
That's probably the last game we're going to fly to because we lost, though. So, but it was real nice. It was my first away trip, and we got to fly on the plane, whereas a few of the boys earlier on in the season, they played in Vannes, and that's like a 10-hour bus trip, and I was unfortunately injured for that game.
Okay,
mate. Up to see Jerome's other mate as well, John Afo. He's up there now as well. Yeah. He's in Vannes enjoying it. But generally, like aside from the logistics and the bus trips and the beers on the way back, like how are you finding Pro D2? Because landing in the top 14, we've already mentioned, can be a culture shock, but Pro D2 is another level compared to other different levels, you know, second tier in England or elsewhere. So how are you finding Pro D2 in general? Because it's mayhem.
Look, it is crazy, but I think the fact that I had experienced France beforehand made it a lot easier for me to transition second time around. And you know, it's weird. I'm sort of enjoying it because it just gives me flashbacks of what it was like when before I became a professional rugby player. You know, they still have a lot of that sort of rugby community sense in Pro D2. If that makes sense, like it's, like when I was playing club rugby, it's all about hanging out with your mates and enjoying yourself afterwards and that sort of stuff. And that's sort of the vibe that I'm getting being back in it, and it just gives me a little bit of like warm feelings, really, because you grow to sort of appreciate playing rugby with your mates when it's like that.
But Johnny mentioned comparing it to the English second tier there. It's great that the crowds are massive, it's vibrant, and it's a thriving second tier league in France, which you don't get in most other countries in the world, do you?
Oh, it's crazy. Like the fans here absolutely love this team, and I think it's massive for the sport because there's a lot of history in a lot of these Pro D2 clubs as well, and you sort of feel the passion when you talk to a Biarritz fan, how passionate they are about the side. It's almost like the team is etched into their being. That's how passionate they are, and like when you play at home games or away games, it honestly feels like you're playing in a top level competition because of how passionate the fans are.
Well, there's a lot of positives, and it sounds like you swerved the 10-hour bus trip to Van and you flew to Rouen. So the negatives are all fine. They're out of the way now, Johnny.
Well, I haven't experienced the negatives yet.
Wait till the presidents get involved and all sorts off the field. Then you might have a few negatives. Until then, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Joe, and sharing your insights into the Wallabies and the secretary in France and everything in between. And enjoy the whiskey and golf tour of Scotland when you go and see John Beattie over there.
I'm looking forward to it, man. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Cheers, Joe.
Pleasure, mate.
Thanks, fella.
Catch up soon. Take care, guys.
Speaking of Edinburgh and having beers, Johnny, how does a free case of beer sound?
Sign me up, mate. It is getting cold. It's no longer time for beach drinking. It's home drinking, not leaving the house drinking. So if you've got something for me, Tim, send it this way.
We will send one to you as well, Jerome. With the Autumn Nation series back and Christmas coming up, our very good friends at Beer 52 are offering you a free case of 8 craft beers. All you have to do is go to beer52.com/French and cover the meager postage costs of £5.95 to claim your free case now. Each month, they send their members a case of beer from a different part of the world. And we've been a member of Beer 52 for a while now, me and you, Johnny, and we absolutely love it.
It's class.
They showcase the best independent breweries from across the globe. So there's no better way to enjoy a good beer during this year's Autumn Nation series. So far, members have experienced beers from 40 different countries spanning 5 continents, from big, juicy pale ales and crisp, refreshing lagers to delicious, sumptuous stouts. You can try the best beers from across the world with the UK's #1 beer club. And if dark beer is not your thing, you can choose the light-only case, and you get the award-winning Ferment magazine, a couple of tasty snacks included as well. And if after all that, you're still not satisfied for whatever reason, you can simply pause or cancel at any time. So what are you waiting for? Just head to beer52.com/French to claim your free case now. That's beer, then the numbers 52.com/French, and a case of beer can be on its way straight to your door. A lot of international chat there. So not too much time to touch on the top 14, although we did discuss the Polar Rochelle game earlier on. But before we get into a bit of top 14 action, transfers, there's always transfers. Is Dan Bigger in Toulon already or not?
Mate, he's still being, like, nothing's been announced yet. So Jerome probably knows he's signed for Toulouse and we don't, but he's still between Racing, Clermont, Toulon. There's still 2 or 3 clubs chasing a Big Ten. That with Mathieu Jalibert on the market, Yanchis as well from South Africa. So it hasn't been announced yet, but mate, there are tons of things floating around. Jamie George potentially to Clermont, with things really changing in England. We saw Baptiste Couillou as well at Lyon. He activated his liberation clause this week, which is always a tough conversation to have with the president. Actually, I want to leave. I don't want to take up my +1. When it comes from a player, it's always hardcore. There's rumours he might go into Stade Francais. Thomas Dutoy, he's at the Cell Sea Sharks. He was a joker for Toulouse in 2019. You probably played with him, Jerome. It's been announced he's going to Lyon. Pierre Popelin, moving from La Rochelle to Cast. Joshua Tuasova, who would definitely be in the PI's team, his move to Racing is to confirmed. I mate, there's loads of movement up in Racing as well, like Wenceslas Laurie, Bernard Leroux with injuries. They're potentially saying they're both stopping end of the year. So like, it's crazy.
And some movement on the coaching side of things as well, Johnny.
Yes, so it was announced today, Olivier Azam has left his role at Montpellier. For family reasons, it's been announced, but you never know, and looking to go back and join family in England. And already, like the way it works, like Jerome knows how the market works. You've already got 3-4 guys lined up to take his job the day after he's gone. So you got Yannick Bru, David Atoub, and Patrice Colazo as well, all lined up. So good coaches looking to go in and fill a spot, and Montpellier obviously looking to up the game and change a little bit what they're about up front after a couple of hard weeks. So yeah, loads of movement.
Anything in Toulouse, Jerome? Any scoops you can give us?
No news here apart from a lot of my Espoir boys getting scooped up to play for the pro team.
And mate, on that note, so a few of your players again showed real character coming back. Like they were down massively in Bayonne at halftime, but some boys really stood up. Ntamak, was decent, not Roman, but Theo, number 8, who I worked and did some of the games he played for the 20s. Like he can carry a ball and offload, and some excitement in him. Your halfbacks as well. You mentioned them previously last time you were on, but how proud were you of those young guys to come back in those types of circumstances in that type of stadium in Bayonne?
Yeah, I was really proud. Obviously, in the first half, everything was pretty one-sided. Bayonne winning the contact, had all the momentum, making the right decisions. And then in the second half, I think our guys just wanted to just get the ball in play. I think what was holding us back was our discipline. But you're going to get there when you got young guys playing. They're just keen to get into everything, keen to play. But the level changes once you go from Espoir to top 14. They found that out. But to stay in the fight and come pretty close to winning the game, I was pretty proud. Despite who was missing in our team and how well Bayonne were playing. But yeah, definitely really proud, and hopefully they can back it up this weekend.
And speaking of just wanting to get the ball and play, we spent an awful long time talking about him last week, Johnny, so we won't dwell on it too much this week, but we have to mention him. Finn Russell, 23 points again in Racing's win away at Brive. He's certainly got a point to prove maybe, and he's playing well still.
Oh, look, his form's good. That's all we can say. Again, so far this season, I think he's been 91% off the tee as well. So like he's kicking well. Scotland could have done with a kicker at the weekend. 23 points and mate, 3 key passes to set up 3 key tries to win away from home in Brive for a team that are battling for their lives. So he's been consistent. He's playing well. He's not quite making the cut at the minute for the Scottish side, but he's still killing it for Racing 92.
And you were doing the Sunday night game, Johnny. Bordeaux, we've spoken about them a bit so far this season, up and down. They came back from 2010 down to beat Toulon, didn't they?
Yeah, and again, they really struggled to control the game. That was quite similar to the Scotland-Australia game. Nobody wanted to control it. Kind of messy conditions, error-strewn, discipline was poor, a couple of free tries. Big Kane Douglas, like I'm not sure if you watched the game, but Kane Douglas, the Aussie second row when he came on, just monstered people. He really changed things, and the physicality went up a level in the second half when he came on. And it really came down to not too much between the sides, but Bordeaux managed to pin down one piece of possession with a minute to go in Toulon 22. Vazea sticks his hands in when he shouldn't. That was a brain fart, and that's it, 3 points. That's the ball game. So it wasn't pretty, but Bordeaux, again, who'd already lost one at home, opening game of the season against Jerome's mob, they came close to it again, to losing to Toulon this weekend, but they just got across the line. So a really important win for them.
Let's have a very quick look ahead to this weekend's games then. And we chatted a lot about it earlier on. So let's get your score prediction in. What is happening with France-Australia?
France winning, I would say 32-15.
Yeah, I don't want to say comfortable, but I think it will be comfortable. Maybe not quite as big a margin. I'll go France by 12, but I think they've got enough. Times have changed now. They get prepped together, even though they've had injuries. They've had time together as a squad. They've got some key men back from injury as well. Cyril Bay has been back. It looks like he's either going to be on the bench or start. He's super important for them. And yeah, I think they'll have just too much power up front. for the Aussies, and a big blitz defense that the Aussies haven't faced so far. The Wallabies haven't faced that in a little while. I think they might be in for a little bit of a shock, as the ABs were this time last year. And I think they might come unstuck. So France comfortably by 15 points.
And we won't go through all the Autumn Nation Series games, but you mentioned earlier, Jerome, you were confident in the All Blacks. So give us a prediction for Wales, New Zealand.
I can't give you a score, but I'll go All Blacks by 20.
I've got ABs by 17, I've written down. I think as well, mate, so much gets banded around against the ABs. The closest I ever came with Scotland was I think it was like a 6-point or an 8-point gap. And like that was as close as we got. But when you talk about the ABs and everyone talks them down, I'm like, it's just at your peril. Like, they're going to come over here and kick the shit out of people. That's what's going to happen. That's what I think is going to happen is, oh, this is the most beatable ABs team we've seen forever and this and that. And then they're going to come over here with a bit between their teeth and unleash on Wales this weekend. So I would say New Zealand by 17.
And what's the pick of the top 14 to look out for this weekend, Johnny?
Toulouse, mate. Again, I don't want to ask Jerome what his team is, and he gives away his hand. But again, without that many internationals, it's obviously going to be difficult. You boys have taken a lot from the heart that was shown in the character in the second half, but it's never easy when you put out the kids. That's the thing. And Ugo Mola spoke really well about how proud he was and the pride he had in them. But that'll be a toughie as well. Like, I think that will just be nicked. I think that'll be a really close game. I'm going to go for that one to lose by 4 points to beat Stade Francais in Toulouse.
Cheers, mate.
You can talk about other games, mate. So Lyon versus Castres, Toulon versus Montpellier as well. How do you see those ones going?
I'll go Castres over Lyon.
In Lyon?
Yeah.
Big Castres
one. Over Lyon. Pick Toulon over Montpellier. And what was the last one?
And Stade Francais to beat Toulouse.
No. No chance.
And we've mentioned we're getting the beers in for Christmas, Jerome. Obviously, we're a bit early, but in the lead up to Christmas, you're going to bring us a code as well, aren't you? You've got some underwear to sell us.
Yes, me and a couple of my best mates from New Zealand have underwear company. I swear to God, they'll be the most comfortable underwear you've ever worn in your life. So I'll send you boys a couple to try, so you guys can say if you like them or not. But we'll definitely have a code for you guys, a discount code for you to hop on and purchase some.
Perfect time for Christmas as well. Get them in for your brothers, get them in for your dads, grandpas. And
are they for all shapes and sizes as well, Drew?
All shapes and sizes.
This is going to sound like quite an odd thing to say, but I'm pregnant at the moment. Not physically myself, but it kind of has the same effect. A lot of pizzas, a lot of curries.
So we go from size extra small to 5XL. So
holy,
you got us covered.
Yeah, we've got everyone covered.
Awesome. Well, we'll have that discount code for everyone next week.
Yeah.
And where would they go to find it? What's the name of the company?
Mintwear.co.
We look forward to getting our hands on a pair of those, don't we, Johnny?
A couple, mate. And then Joe will probably be buying them for my dad for Christmas. It's not this is stuck with me. But mate, that's it. Now I've got grandpas, dads, uncles, brothers. I know what I'm getting them for Christmas. This is going to be everyone's stockings, mate. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Johnny. A big thanks to Jerome and for Joe for joining us. And thanks to you guys for listening. Make sure you hit subscribe, leave us a nice review if you can. Check us out on Rugby Pass and on YouTube. And we'll be back with another episode next week. Au revoir, guys.
Cheers, fellas.
Cheers, guys.